The lowest moment of my life arrived inside a cold metal storage locker where I was, wrapped in an old blanket, eating canned food by the light of a weak camping lantern, while wondering how everything I loved had disappeared so quickly. Just before midnight, my phone lit up with a message from the man who had once promised to stand beside me forever, and his cruel words claimed I would spend the rest of my life poor, forgotten, and completely alone. My name is Natalie Brooks, and only 8 months earlier I believed I was living the life I had always dreamed about because I had a successful career, a beautiful home, and 2 amazing children who filled every room with laughter and happiness. My husband Daniel appeared to be the perfect partner, while my younger sister Vanessa worked beside me every day at the interior design company I had spent years building from the ground up. I trusted Vanessa with everything because she was not only my sister but also my closest friend, and I honestly believed there was nothing that could ever come between us after everything we had survived together growing up. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs that I ignored, including the late-night meetings, the secret phone calls, and the strange way Daniel and Vanessa always seemed to understand each other before either of them spoke. Everything collapsed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when an anonymous envelope arrived at my office with no return address, and inside was a photograph showing Daniel and Vanessa embracing outside an expensive restaurant while smiling at each other with complete confidence. I stared at that picture for several minutes, hoping it had been edited or taken out of context. But something deep inside me already knew that the family I loved had been built on lies. When I confronted Daniel that evening, he did not deny anything, and instead he calmly admitted that he had fallen in love with Vanessa before telling me our marriage had been over for a long time, even though I had never been given the chance to fight for it. The next morning, Vanessa walked into my house without the smallest sign of guilt and claimed that destiny had simply brought them together. But I had no idea that losing my husband was only the beginning of a nightmare that would soon take away my children, my career, my home, and almost my hope for the future. Within 2 weeks, Daniel hired one of the most expensive divorce attorneys in the state, and I quickly realized that every conversation we had shared during our marriage was now being twisted into a weapon that painted me as an unstable mother who cared more about work than her family. Every accusation sounded completely unbelievable to me, yet the carefully prepared lies, fake witnesses, and manipulated records made it seem as though someone had spent months planning my destruction. Long before I discovered the affair, the greatest betrayal came from my own company because several important clients suddenly canceled their contracts, and my board of directors announced an emergency meeting where I was accused of financial misconduct that I knew I had never committed. Before I had the chance to defend myself, Vanessa confidently presented fabricated documents that made it appear I had misused company funds, and by the end of that heartbreaking afternoon, I had lost the business I had spent nearly 10 years building with my own hands. The divorce was finalized much faster than I expected, and the judge awarded Daniel temporary custody of Mason and Lily while ordering me to leave the family home until the remaining legal issues were resolved. Standing outside the courthouse with only 2 suitcases and tears running down my face, I watched Daniel drive away with my children sitting silently in the back seat, while Vanessa smiled from the front passenger seat as though she had finally won the life she had always wanted. My savings disappeared almost overnight, because every dollar went toward legal fees, temporary housing, and basic living expenses, leaving me with almost nothing after months of exhausting court battles that never seemed to end. One painful morning, my debit card was declined while I was trying to buy groceries, and I quietly returned the food to the shelves before walking back to my car with empty hands and a heart filled with shame that I had never experienced before. A few weeks later, I could no longer afford even the cheapest apartment, and an elderly gas station owner kindly suggested renting a small storage locker where a few desperate people occasionally stayed while trying to rebuild their lives after unexpected tragedies. I never imagined that losing my husband, my sister, my career, my home, and my children would lead me to sleeping on a folding cot inside a cold metal unit. But I also had no idea that the greatest turning point of my life was waiting quietly in that lonely place, where everyone else believed my story had already ended. Life inside that storage locker slowly erased the woman I used to be, because every morning began with washing my face in a public restroom, and every night ended with me wondering whether my children still remembered the sound of my voice. The silence became so heavy that I often replayed old family videos on my phone, smiling through tears as I watched birthdays, vacations, and bedtime stories that now felt like memories from someone else's life. One cold evening, I returned after searching all day for work, only to notice an old leather briefcase hidden behind a pile of abandoned boxes that I was certain had never been there before. It was covered in dust and looked forgotten for years, but my heart nearly stopped when I wiped away the dirt and discovered a faded luggage tag with my full name carefully written across the front. The lock refused to open no matter how many numbers I tried, so I finally used a small screwdriver from my toolbox and forced it open after several frustrating minutes that felt like hours. Instead of old papers or worthless junk, I found neat bundles of cash stacked from one side to the other, along with a sealed envelope that carried the familiar handwriting of my late Uncle Benjamin, a man everyone believed had died with nothing to his name. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter because Uncle Benjamin had disappeared from the family many years before, and nobody had ever explained why he chose to live alone in the mountains until the day he passed away. His message said the money inside the briefcase was only enough to begin a journey, while the real inheritance was hidden in a place only I could find, and he warned that the truth about my family had been buried for decades by people willing to destroy anyone who came too close. Tucked inside the envelope was a hand-drawn map leading to an isolated ranch in northern Wyoming, along with a small brass key and one final sentence that changed everything I believed about my past, because it claimed my father had not died by accident as everyone had always told me. As dawn broke outside the storage facility, I packed my few remaining belongings into my old car, looked back at the tiny metal unit that had become my temporary home, and promised myself that no matter what waited at the end of that journey, I would uncover the truth and reclaim the life that had been stolen from me. The drive to northern Wyoming took 3 exhausting days, and every mile felt like I was leaving behind the broken woman who had accepted defeat while moving closer to answers that had been hidden from me since childhood. I slept in inexpensive roadside motels, survived on gas station coffee and sandwiches, and kept Uncle Benjamin's letter beside me because it was the only thing giving me enough courage to continue. The map eventually led me onto a narrow dirt road, surrounded by towering pine trees where there were no houses, no traffic, and no phone signal, making the entire place feel forgotten by the rest of the world. At the end of the trail stood an old iron gate secured with a heavy lock, and when I inserted the small brass key from the envelope, it turned perfectly as though my uncle had expected me to arrive one day. Beyond the gate sat a beautiful wooden cabin beside a quiet lake, and although it looked abandoned from the outside, the lights inside came on the moment I opened the front door, as if someone had carefully prepared everything for my arrival. Every room was spotless, while shelves were filled with carefully labeled boxes, family photographs, journals, financial records, and dozens of sealed envelopes that carried my uncle's careful handwriting. Inside the largest envelope I discovered documents proving that my father had secretly owned valuable land containing rare natural resources, but he had refused to sell his share to a wealthy businessman named Victor Harrison because he believed the property belonged to future generations of our family. My uncle had spent years gathering evidence that my father's death had been arranged to seize those assets, and the papers also revealed that Daniel and Vanessa had unknowingly become part of a much larger scheme controlled by Victor and several powerful business associates. As I continued reading through the files, I found legal documents showing that Uncle Benjamin had quietly transferred every remaining family asset into a protected trust with me listed as the only rightful beneficiary, and independent financial reports estimated the total value at more than $80 million. Tears filled my eyes as I finally understood that my uncle had not simply left me an inheritance because he had spent the last years of his life protecting my family legacy, until the day I was strong enough to uncover the truth and fight for everything that had been stolen from us. I contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation the moment I returned to an area with phone service, and although the agent who answered my call sounded doubtful at first, everything changed after I handed over my uncle records, financial documents, photographs, and encrypted storage drives that connected decades of fraud to several powerful executives. Within weeks, investigators quietly confirmed that the evidence was authentic, and they asked me to remain out of public view while they built a case strong enough to expose every person involved without giving anyone the chance to destroy the remaining proof. Nearly 6 months later, the investigation exploded into national headlines as federal agents executed search warrants across multiple businesses, arrested Victor Harrison and several of his closest associates, and uncovered millions of dollars connected to fraud, corruption, money laundering, and the cover-up of my father's death. Daniel and Vanessa were also arrested after investigators proved they had knowingly submitted false testimony, forged financial records, and participated in the plan that had destroyed my reputation, my marriage, and my relationship with my children. When the civil courts reviewed everything that had happened, every false accusation against me was dismissed, my professional license was fully restored, and the judge ruled that I had been the victim of a carefully planned conspiracy that had manipulated both the legal system and my personal life. The custody order was immediately overturned, and the happiest moment of my life arrived when Mason and Lily ran into my arms with tears in their eyes, apologizing for believing the lies they had been told while promising they would never let anyone separate us again. After receiving the inheritance worth more than $80 million, I chose not to spend my life chasing luxury because losing everything had taught me that peace, honesty, and family were worth far more than wealth could ever provide. I rebuilt my interior design company, created a charitable foundation that helped single parents rebuild their lives after betrayal and financial hardship, and visited my uncle's final resting place to thank the man whose courage had saved both my future and my family legacy. Today I no longer measure success by the size of a house or the balance in a bank account, because the greatest victory was discovering that truth can survive even the darkest betrayal, and that hope has the power to rebuild a life that once seemed completely destroyed. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.